Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. Today we are in First Corinthians, which is a book that was written to a church that Paul himself had planted. And this is a church that was found in a very sinful area. This Corinth was similar to what Las Vegas is to the United States. You know, the Sin City is basically a good way to describe Corinth. And so these Christians came from this background. And so you can imagine a lot of issues arising in this young church. And First Corinthians is written to them to help them navigate through some of these issues that they were having as a church. And so it's a very practical book, and a book that we can use and utilize in our church life, but also in our individual life. There's a lot of really good stuff there to learn from. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, kind of the topic that's being brought up by Paul here is the divisions that they were having. Some were saying that they were of Paul, some were saying they were of Apollos, some were saying they were of Cephas, and some were saying they were of Christ. And so at least 4 divisions in the church. And it seems as though these divisions were based upon them seeking wisdom, fleshly wisdom, worldly wisdom. And Paul is correcting them on that. He's showing them that, hey, the way to Christ and the way of the Christian life is a way, at least from the eyes of the world, in a way that is very foolish. And God has chosen it to be that way. Has chosen it to be that way. In verse 27 of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, it says, "But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong. And the base things of the world and the despised God has chosen the things that are not, so that he may nullify the things that are." So God purposely chose to work things out to where he would, the foolish things would be the things that he would accept. The despised things would be the things that are acceptable to him. The weak things acceptable to him. So that no one could boast before him. And so in order to come to Christ, in a sense, you've got to look like a fool to the rest of the world, because the rest of the world don't understand how, they don't understand faith. They don't understand, especially the Christian faith. They think it's foolishness. They think it's nonsense. And so to accept Christ by many of your friends, your family members, whoever else, society in general, a lot of people are going to think you very foolish for doing that. And it can be one of the things that keep people from actually accepting Christ. But this is the way that God has set it up, because this way no one can come to God saying, well, I acquired salvation based upon my wisdom and my ability to figure all things out and everything like that. No, he's chosen the foolish things, the despised things, the things that other people or the world would not expect, and these are the things that are acceptable to him. This is very much like the way that God works in general in his kingdom. Remember, Jesus said that the first would be last and the last would be first. Basically, in the kingdom, in the spiritual kingdom that God established, basically everything's turned on its side. It's like a negative of a picture, you know, where where you see the opposite. Where there's light, you see shadow. Where there's shadows, you see light. And the picture's inverted. That's kind of what the kingdom life is all about. Everything's inverted. Think about not only you're accepting Christ and accepting the foolishness of the cross, as Paul calls it, at least foolishness in the eyes of the world, that is. But think about also from that point on, the fact that Christ said that those who would be the servants would be the ones who would be actually the leaders in the kingdom. Those who would choose the lesser place before God would receive the exalted place. He who humbles himself will be exalted, the scripture says. In the way that we labor for the Lord, in our working for him, it's a restful type of work. In other words, to do the proper work for the Lord, you've got to rest in the Lord. It's kind of a counterintuitive thing. It's, if I want to be successful, whether I'm a preacher or I'm doing some type of service to others, I'm serving the poor or whatever, yes, I work hard and I'm diligent for it, but all the while in my heart and in my mind, I'm resting and trusting in God. And so you have to rest in order to do your best, is the idea. Think about also the Christian life is a life of surrender and committing oneself to death. Dying to your own ambitions, your own desires, your own needs, and putting God above all of that. Dying to self, but living for God. And that's very counterintuitive to think, hey, I can have a fulfilled life, a life of peace and joy and happiness by surrendering my will to someone else. That's very counterintuitive, but it's very true, and it's the way that God has set things up, and it's very, very true. When you surrender, you wake up in the morning saying, Lord, I give you this day, I give you my life, I give you my everything, and you live and you walk through your whole day with that attitude, there is just so much peace and joy and happiness in that type of life. I can't explain why that is necessarily, but it is true. But you have to do, again, what is counterintuitive to enjoy that. So someone might question, why does God do this? Why does he invert things? Why does he turn things upside down? There might be many answers. In the case of the wisdom, in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, it tells us that it's so that no one can boast before God. But I think that there's other reasons for it as well. And that is because when you do something that's counterintuitive, it requires faith and it requires trust in the person who is asking you to do something that is counterintuitive. Think about what they say about bears. You know, bears are huge, they're ferocious, they're loud, they're scary, especially if you see one in person. They're just very intimidating. But what people have discovered is, if a bear ever comes up to you, the best thing that you can do is not run, not try to climb a tree, but to play dead. So imagine you're walking through the woods and a humongous grizzly bear comes up, he's yelling, he's coming right towards your direction, and your nature guide tells you, hey, lay down and play dead. Believe me, that's the last thing I would want to do if a big bear was approaching me. I'd want to take off running. There'd be adrenaline pumping, my heart would be pumping, I'd be ready to get out of there. But it'd take trust and faith in the guide to lay down, play dead, even if the bear came up sniffing, rubbing his nose against you, maybe yelling at you, to just lay there, limp, dead, not moving, with all this adrenaline pumping through you. That would take great faith and trust. And that's true in that scenario, and it's true in our lives before God. When we do something that's counterintuitive to enjoy something that we wouldn't normally expect from doing those certain things, that takes a lot of faith and trust. But you know what? As we would trust the nature guide to know what he was talking about in the case of the bear, so we can trust God to know what he's talking about. He's the one that created us. He's the one that set up this whole world. And he knows what's best for us. And so it might seem a little bit counterintuitive to accept something that's foolish to everybody else, to commit ourselves to surrender and death before him, to receive joy, life, and peace, or even to rest in him, expecting to be more prosperous for him. But this is the way he set it up, and I'm obviously, I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful way that God has done it. And it just works out just perfectly the way that he has done it. And in his wisdom, he has set it up this way. So these are just some thoughts to think about today, guys. I do love you guys. I hope you guys have a great day. God bless.